Julia Brodsky, welcome to the Astroben podcast. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for doing this. Let's jump straight in. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your? Let's start with your background in the space industry. How did you fall into the space industry?
We can start with me being a teenager reading all types of sci-fi stories I could get my hands on, right? Asimov, Shackley, Bradbury, Stanislav Lem, you name it. And I really loved that. I really also loved education. So obviously I ended up as an astronaut instructor later on, but not right away, right? I was really bored in school, in my middle school. So I was, just instead of going to school, I was reading those sci-fi stories. And I was pretty much kicked out of school. But as I was, spending my time reading and talking to different smart people and walking the streets, I saw that a magnet math and science school has an open house. So I decided to check it out. And I actually applied. So I spent 2 years in a magnet math and science school, a high school. I was a pretty mediocre student. But there was an option to get a specialization in STEM education, which I did. So I was learning science, I was learning math, I was also thinking about how to share it with people. And then when I graduated, I knew that I cannot do anything with my hands at all. So I knew I need to find a science that is as far removed from doing any experimentation as possible. So obviously my choice was astronomy and astrophysics. So I got my degree, my master's in space research and astrophysics. And also while being an undergraduate student, after my second year in school, I applied to be an intern student at Lunar and Planetary Institute in Houston, Texas. So, and that was the year when they discovered the first exoplanet. Can you imagine? I'm that old. I I, I spent my whole childhood, you know, uh, at the time when people had no idea whether there are any other planets orbiting any other stars. People thought probably yes, but there was no proof to that. And then, so I was 18 when we actually found the first exoplanet outside of the solar system. And now, obviously, we know thousands of them, right? And we know that there are many, many more that we haven't discovered yet. So that was extremely exciting. And the problem is, when I was growing, and I grew up in Russia, during the perestroika time, during the wild 90s, the situation was pretty bad, and the situation with science was pretty bad. So my advisor told me that, Julia, if you want to do anything science related, you need to actually look elsewhere, outside of the country. So, and I got my student visa first at Rice University. I worked as a researcher trying to explore the binary stars, um, and analyzing the data from X-ray satellites. And then I won a green card, and I was able to actually work. And I applied to be an astronaut instructor at Johnson Space Center. So that was the time when they were just starting the International Space Station. Everyone hoped that it will be that it will cement the peace between the countries, right? So and the crews were mixed. We either had one Russian, two Americans, or one American, two Russians for each expedition, and they hired me because I could speak English, I could speak Russian, and I knew some space science. Right, so that was extremely exciting because obviously the station was being built. It wasn't even there when I started. And when my manager, my first manager was Bill O'Keefe, and I was really lucky to get him. He was the lead of the training division at Johnson Space Center at that moment. So he asked me, like, whether I feel comfortable, starting the job teaching astronauts. And I said, sure, I just graduated from school. I thought, if I have a textbook, I will learn. So I asked him, do you have a textbook? And he said, what a great idea. Why don't you write one? So
So you literally wrote the book.
well, I was one of many people who actually wrote the ISS training manual, yes. The first version of it. So
Wow, and
that was extremely
what sort of
fun.
stuff were you helping astronauts to do? Was it sort of building the space station, sort of doing day-to-day tasks? What were you sort of tasked with?
So my job was I was an guidance, navigation, and control systems instructor. So I had to figure out how the guidance, navigation, and control systems actually work, learning from the engineers, figuring out the engineering schematics and so on. And then I had to help the programmers to develop what we called PTT, Part Task Trainer. So the astronauts could actually practice working on this particular system, disconnected from other systems first. So, well, first of all, I should say, we would give them some introductory lectures. So we would design the lectures and deliver those. Then we would develop the PTT lessons and teach the astronauts and the flight controllers on how to operate the space station, how to operate this particular system on the space station. And then, of course, we had SSTF, Space Station Training Facility, where all the systems would work together, and the astronauts would sit in the mock-up of the station, and we, the instructors, would sit in the SSTF representing the flight controllers and throwing in, mishaps, wrong telemetry signatures and so on, and seeing whether the astronauts will be able to figure out how to resolve the issue. And we would start with simple problems, and then the problems that actually affects many systems at once, the problems that distribute all over the station. Yes, that
Fantastic.
was pretty fun. Exercising the evil part of your brain, right? Trying to come up with more and more complex scenarios when everything breaks down. And I remember Jim he was telling us, oh, come on, people, like, we're not going to experience all of these issues at once. And then I remember he actually went up and he emailed us several days after he arrived saying, like, hi, training team, thank you for training me. Everything turns out to be very useful. All of the trainings that I got.
Well, I guess, and what was the hardest thing about astronauts training? Because I know, especially American astronauts have to learn Russian, and a lot of them say that's the hardest thing. Obviously, you didn't have to worry about that, but from what you observed, what was the most difficult part about training to be an astronaut?
Well, it depends on who you are, whether you're a newly hired astronaut or an experienced astronaut, because people who were experienced astronauts, they were actually used to the analog way of controlling the space shuttle, and they didn't really trust all those Windows, Unix-based Windows, all those ways of controlling the station from the computer initially. So it was more like showing them that it is as reliable as the actual, hardware that you can click up and down or left or right. So it's just a different paradigm of controlling things, right? So we were designing the first Windows, the first controller Windows for the space station. It was still very new. So we had to work together with the astronauts and the flight controllers to figure out what do we consider the most important, what parts should we definitely put on this particular window, how do we make sure that in a situation of emergency, the astronauts have an access to the most important things first, and so on. So this was all new and quite interesting. Actually helped us to understand both the structure and the interfaces of the International Space Station much better, but also to understand the ways people communicate with the whole system. People interact with it, right?
Absolutely. You've had such a unique perspective on the International Space Station. How, what was it like seeing the cooperation between different countries? Was it like, was it truly sort of inspiring, and did it feel at the time like it was a sort of beacon of hope for international cooperation, and peace was possible between different countries? And how did that sort of change over the years? Did it start off very optimistic, and as time went on there was different things on Earth that affected that relationship, or did the ISS kind of, was it a continuum, and you know
Well, when I was there, it was still very optimistic, and it was such a joy to see, that people were opening their documentation, people were opening their facilities to each other, people were giving tours to each other, they were learning each other's language, and so no, everything seemed to be just turning to the better. And I really hoped, that it will stay this way. Of course, what's happening now, it's just so tragic for
mm,
everything.
yeah. Well, let's touch on that, because your actual, well, what you're doing at the moment kind of speaks to that, really. So tell me about your astrobiology program, and personally, what was the motivation for your next stage of your career when you finished being an astronaut trainer?
Sure. So I have 3 kids. My husband is from Kiev, from Ukraine. So, and our first child has lots of issues. He is a special needs child, and we don't know why. And one of the hypotheses was that my husband actually lived in Kiev during Chernobyl. I don't know whether it had any effect or not. So my husband left Ukraine after Chernobyl event, several years after that. And when our first child was born, it was clear that I cannot continue working as I was doing before, because as an astronaut instructor, we were following the crew, meaning that we would support many and many night shifts. It was just impossible with a newborn sick child. So I decided, as I told you, I was always interested in education. I thought, well, why don't I explore the American education? I know nothing about it. And this is a place where I can actually make myself useful. So I started teaching at private schools. I was teaching physics, I was teaching mathematics. And as we were doing it, we had two more kids. So, and at some point, my daughter, she was 6 at that moment. So I have my oldest one is a boy, then a girl, then a boy. So my daughter asked me, what is multiplication? Well, I told her. So, and she was playing, it was autumn, she was playing in the leaves, she was jumping over the piles of leaves for about 3 hours. And then she came to me and she said, Mom, I understood everything about multiplication. Now explain me how to solve equations with x. So I thought I need to do something about it. and there was nothing like that in the US at the moment. In Russia and in Europe, we have what is called mathematical circles. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I'm probably the wrong person to ask. That gets exposed regularly on this podcast is my lack of math skills or maths. So, but I'm sure many of my listeners will know.
Mathematical circles are just gatherings of people who just play with mathematics. They don't do anything. They don't just sit and think hard, like, oh, how do I get that only right answer? But this is actually a way of playing, solving riddles, playing mathematical games, playing logical puzzles, and so on, doing some ornaments. So I decided I'll do something like that. And I did it for my daughter and for her friends. And at the same time, I was looking for materials for those classes. I wanted, since no one would tell me what to do, right? It was completely directed by children's interests and abilities. I was looking, what fun things I could find for them. And at that moment, the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute at Berkeley was holding their first mathematical circles gathering. So I emailed them, I asked them, do you guys have anything for really young kids? And they said, no, but if you have something, come and tell us about it. Well, that's actually the result of those discussions. I actually wrote a book about it.
So that's the art of inquiry, is it?
That's how the art of inquiry started. Right. So, and the reason I started it with mathematics and not, say, with physics, because, again, I am an immigrant. I don't have that many materials at hand. I have 3 kids at home. So I was like half, working here and there, a little bit here, a little bit there, but not full time. So mathematics was easy. It doesn't require anything except paper and pencil, right? So for physics, I just would have enough space and enough materials for that amount of kids. And the art of inquiry was growing quite fast. So the first year we had 6 kids, the second year we had 12 kids, the third year we had 25 kids, the fourth year we had 60 kids. I knew I needed to start doing something about it. So we actually had to rent some space and hire some high school students and undergrad students and guide them on how to develop lesson plans and how not to lecture to the kids and how to play with mathematics with the kids. It's very different from what they do in school.
Well, how is it different? Because I'm quite intrigued by, I'm lucky enough to have spoken to many science communicators, and part of science communication is sort of communicating complex problems and making them easier for people to understand. So what's been particularly effective for you? And do you think it's perhaps because you've got such an interesting history? Because I remember at school, if you hear from people that have, I never met anyone who worked for NASA, but, do you think sort of, how important is that side of things where they're learning from people who have had real life experience? Do you think that's a part of it?
So I think I'm lucky in many different ways. First of all, my grandfather loved to give me some interesting questions to ponder on, scientific and mathematical ones. Then I went through that magnet math and science school where there were lots of teenagers who would just, find something interesting and play with it. And then, of course, working with the astronauts themselves, working with the people who have to operate in the world that is not familiar to them, right? To solve problems in difficult and unfamiliar situations. And in many situations, there is no one right answer. You can solve it in many different ways. So I made an emphasis on providing the problems to the kids that have many answers. And kids, they find those answers. One kid finds one answer, another kid finds another answer. And of course, they're all sure that their answer is the one and only one, right? Because it works. And then I would make them talk to each other and see how that actually helps them to build their understanding. I'll give you a very simple example. For example, I would play this with kindergartners. So let's say I give you 4 toys: a butterfly, a rocket, an airplane, and a sailboat. And I ask them, which one doesn't belong? So, what would you say?
Say it again. So a sailboat. What are the 3?
A sailboat, an airplane, a rocket, and a butterfly.
A butterfly because it's not made by humans.
This is one of the possible answers, right?
Or a rocket because it's the only one that I have in Lego form, which I do behind me. I've got a Lego rocket behind me.
Well, this is probably also an answer, but they would come up with an explanation that it doesn't really need air to fly or to move, right? That it can fly in the airless space, right? And so on, the sailboat doesn't belong because 3 others are flying, right? And this one is not. So, and to show the kids that they can actually build the understanding together and see more of this world together if they help each other and actually listen to each other. So I also would make sure that I provide them with the problems that are not fully defined. Because in textbook, you could get a problem that is fully defined for you. And all you need is to find the right number, right, that fits. But in the real life, you actually need to figure out, what are they asking for? Like, what are we looking for? Do we really need to solve this problem? Can we solve another problem instead of this? And so on. So, and I also found out that kids really love what's called aha problems. The problems that require some outside of the box thinking, and they would not stop. The little ones, they continue playing with it. They still have this natural curiosity. As they grow, that curiosity diminishes. I was taking the same matchstick puzzles to kindergarten and to 6th grade students. And the kindergartners, they're like little puppies, they start moving those matches around, they start building something out of them. Julia, look here. Am I doing it right? Julia, look, I've solved it. No, oh, this doesn't work. Let me redo it again. The sixth graders would just look at me. Mrs. Brodsky, no one showed us how to solve these problems before. And it takes me like 20 minutes just to help them to relax and start actually playing with it. And
yeah, it sounds like the art of inquiry, getting people to ask the right questions. And that's so useful, especially with things like AI coming to fruition now. It's you don't need to do the maths, you need to know what questions to ask the AGI to do. Let's pivot slightly, because I don't want to run out of time. So that was the art of inquiry, which you're still doing. How did that evolve to the Earthlings Hub? Because tell me about the Earthlings Hub.
Before we get to the Earthlings Hub, there was one more step. So at some point I was teaching at a progressive school, actually started by the student of John Dewey, a very famous American educator. So, and the principal asked me, Julia, could you please develop something that would involve a year-long curriculum, that would involve astronomy, biology, chemistry, physics, and a bit of engineering over 1 year.
Yeah.
So I just looked at him, said, Neil, this is going to be astrobiology. This is how I started teaching astrobiology. First, I started teaching it at a private school. Very quickly, I saw how engaged the students are. I never saw kids to be so engaged before. They would stay in my class. They would not leave. The kids from other classes would come to me during the break asking, Julia, can we also go to your class? Julia, can you stay after school and tell us what you're talking about in your class and so on? I thought, I'm doing something right. I need to build on it. So a year prior to pandemics, I started an online program, and I learned all Zoom prior to pandemics. I started an online program for kids all over the globe, a program in astrobiology. And then the kids didn't want to leave. First, originally, I thought I will develop a 1 year long astrobiology course. They said, no, we are not leaving. You're teaching us next year too. I said, oh, come on, what am I teaching you? And they asked me, tell us, how do aliens think? Like, I don't know whether they even exist, right? So, but I turned to my husband, who is a cognitive psychologist. And I told him, how do aliens think? Can we develop a course for these kids? And we developed a course on non-human minds. So we talked to the kids about the animal perception, and we talked to the kids about AI. So I taught myself quite a lot about AI in those days. And interestingly enough, now I find myself more prepared to what's going on right now. So, and then I told them, okay, 2 years is enough, go. And they said, no, we are not going to leave. Teach us something else. And I asked them, what do you want me to teach you now? And what do you want me to talk with you about? And they said, talk to us about existential risks and opportunities. We want to know what to await. We want to understand what to expect from the future. Because we see that the world is changing so fast. And I said, okay. And I was listening to Daniel Schmachtenberger, to other people, and, trying to develop a course that will be clear and on the right level for these teenagers. And as we were talking about the pros and cons of nuclear energy, Russia started the war with Ukraine. And the kids just asking me, like, Julia, did you know? Because that was the day we were talking about the nuclear bombs. And I was completely devastated. I never thought that it will actually happen. I couldn't sleep for a month. I had no idea what I could do. I was a part of the science policy cohort at American Geophysical Union, so I reached out to the people there first, and we wrote some petition, and from the Earth and Space Science community, urging people, to do something to stop this war. Obviously, petitions do not work, unfortunately, at this level. So I thought, what can I do? What do I know what to do, and how can I help at least in some, reasonable way? So I reached out to my friends, educators, scientists, psychologists, and we started this Earthlings Hub initiative. For several years, I have been a STEM education lead at Blue Marble Space Institute of Science, which is an amazing, amazing organization of really enthusiastic people who really care about our planet and who really care about science. So I didn't have time to start my own nonprofit. So I turned out to Sanjoy, who is the director of Blue Marble Space Institute of Science, and Graham Lau, who is the director of communication, and other people. And I asked them, can we have Blue Marble as an umbrella? And they said yes. So very quickly, we were able to start an organization and start our operations. And first, we started with teaching the kids who had to run away and, to evacuate to other countries. And because it was in the middle of the school year, right? People run with whatever was on them. They end up in a new country with another language. It's mostly moms with children. They don't know where they are, how to continue their life. Kids lost their teachers, kids lost their friends. So we wanted to do something meaningful. We wanted to support these children. We wanted to let them direct us in what they want to learn. Not, us telling them, more burden on you. No, we wanted to help. Right? So we started those classes, and very quickly we were approached by orphanages that were evacuated too. And people in those orphanages, you should imagine, like, they have 5 adults for 60, 70 kids. And they were told that they're evacuating for 2-3 weeks. So they had no personal belongings with them, nothing. And, those hosting countries, of course, they provide the shelters, they provide the food. But still, it's a new country, it's a different country, it's a new language. Those teachers, those adults don't really know much. They're very afraid that something could happen with the kids, that the kids, could get lost. They have to take care of the laundry, the medical needs. Some young kids don't like this new food, so they have to cook for them. They just didn't have much time for teaching. And by teaching, we could give some, a break to these caregivers as well. So that's how we started. And then, of course, we got contacted by the refugee camps in Ukraine itself. And that's what we are doing right now. We are teaching classes in Chernivtsi, in Kryvyi Rih, in Vinnytsia, and in Lviv. So We have absolutely amazing volunteers. Um, just, I forgot to tell you. So the people who start, so the three founders, that's besides me, it's Sasha Kaurov, who has a PhD in astrophysics and astronomy from U Chicago. He later worked at Harvard and Princeton. And right now he is in Harvard again, doing the sociology of science. And he has an amazing network of postdocs, including bilingual postdocs, and many of them actually joined our program, and they're teaching science courses and science lectures to the kids. And another person, Yulia Turchininova, she is a professor of physics, also pedagogy and psychology. And she is just an amazing person from whom I learn on a daily basis. She knows lots and lots of teachers, both in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine. So we were able to find lots of amazing volunteers through her. And we are running over 20 classes per week at different locations right now. Classes running from English and coding, which are always popular, right, to multidisciplinary classes like astrobiology. I do teach astrobiology there. Cognitive sciences, the languages of science, philosophy of science, history like the rise and fall of civilizations and so on. So we're trying to support the children in their ability to see the big picture. We want them to understand that the future is not just the war, right? There are many different scenarios on how the humanity is going to develop. We want them to understand that they actually will be a part of this future, and that they are part of this society, including the scientific society right now, right? That we actually take them seriously, we take their ideas seriously, we're trying to help them to develop their ideas. And when you talk to the kids about big questions, it actually unites people, it brings them together, it shows them that we as a human civilization all have the same challenges and we need to work together. So, but we also trying to support the agency. Yesterday Russia was bombing Ukraine, including bombing Kiev, and I was talking to one of our teachers who is in Kiev right now, and he was telling me about one of his students who is still in Kharkiv. And he says, this boy, he doesn't allow the war to define his future. He is the one who is defining his today and his tomorrow. He says the war is trying to scare us, the war is creating lots of obstacles, the war is trying to kill us, but this boy, he is choosing to connect to our classes. He doesn't allow the war to derail his future.
It's so powerful to hear, and I think you're being quite modest, because through that you've reached over 10,000 Ukrainian students in the last year, and that's reaching them to directly to bunkers and bomb shelters. It's almost unimaginable, and I was struck by you shared an article which I'll share in the show notes as to why you teach kids astrobiology, and you talk there about how you want to create a community of citizens of the universe, and I was sort of struck by that. Seems to be what you're doing. You know, the war's going on and it's horrible, but you know, especially with kids, they will get through it, and you know, through being inspired by people like yourself, they'll be able to be the next generation of astrobiologists, which is fantastic. I just wondered if you had a sort of final thought on that.
So, see, when I was talking to the astronauts, when people look at our planet from the orbit and they realize how small our planet is and it really needs us to take care of it, and we really need to stop fighting and actually start facing the challenges that we have as a civilization and as future spacefaring civilization, right? I think when we're talking about space sciences with the kids, we help them to gain the same perspective. They start feeling themselves together as a part of humanity. They start uh, seeing what their responsibility is and why. And of course, why they need to study science, right? That's because we actually have so many challenges right now. The world is changing fast. We're living in the era of AI, and we talk with them about AI. We talk about how we can explore the space with the help of AI. So we're talking about pros and cons of AI. And just this feeling of the big challenges in front of us, and the feeling of how small our planet is and how it really needs our help and care. It really makes a lot of difference in how the child will grow.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's been fascinating to chat to you, and I wish we could carry on talking, but thank you so much for everything that you do. I'm gonna share all the details in the show notes of the Earthlings Hub, the Art of Inquiry, and Blue Marble Institute of Science as well. But Julia, thank you so much. I'd love to chat to you again in the future, and keep doing everything you're doing. Thank you.
Thank